Look, I've been following Formula One for over a decade now, and I have never, and I mean never, heard Max Verstappen sound this defeated and honest about his team's situation. This isn't hyperbole or me trying to create drama for the sake of a video. This is genuine exhaustion mixed with brutal, unfiltered reality from the guy who's won 3 world championships. 1 week after finishing second in Austria, a race where he might have actually won with a completely different strategy call, Red Bull rolled up to Silverstone looking absolutely devastated and broken. And here's what's absolutely wild about this situation. The reality is somehow even worse than the initial headlines suggested. During qualifying at Silverstone, Verstappen got absolutely hammered by a power unit issue that completely destroyed his qualifying session and his grid position. But here's the part that changed everything for me. Even without that power unit failure, he openly admitted that Red Bull simply doesn't have the pace to compete at the front anymore, not just this weekend, but fundamentally. He could only manage 7th place on the grid in a car that statistically should be fighting for pole positions and front-running races. Think about that for a genuine second. Max Verstappen, the driver who won multiple world championships, looked at his car in qualifying and basically said, "Yeah, we're not even close to being competitive here, and we can't fix it." But that's not even the worst part of what happened that weekend. The worst part is what he said next in the paddock interview. And trust me, when you hear what it was, it completely changes how you understand what's actually happening with Red Bull right now and why their 2026 season has become an absolute nightmare. I'm going to break down absolutely everything for you. The mechanical failures that keep occurring at random, the energy management crisis that's destroying them on specific circuits, the cost cap nightmare that's preventing them from developing solutions, and most importantly, why even Verstappen himself doesn't believe they can recover from this. This is the genuine story of how a championship-caliber team imploded in real time. And spoiler alert right now, it's not just bad luck or a few unlucky moments. It's something much deeper and much more systemic than that. 1 week before Silverstone actually happened, Verstappen was still being asked in the standard FIA press conference if he believed another championship comeback was still possible for him and his team. You know what his response was? He literally shut down the entire question. He didn't just say, "I'm not sure," or "we're working on it." He told the assembled media that they shouldn't even ask him that question anymore because it's not realistic, it's not going to happen, and he's tired of discussing something that isn't possible. That single moment right there is the moment I realized that this 2026 season has broken something fundamental inside the Red Bull organization, and it's something that might take years, plural, to actually recover from and repair. And I'm genuinely here to explain exactly why this is happening, because when you start digging deeper into all the details, the situation gets progressively crazier and more complex the further you go down the rabbit hole of analysis. Let me start with the mechanical nightmare that's been relentlessly haunting Max Verstappen throughout this entire 2026 season, because this is legitimately where the story actually begins and where everything starts to fall apart. Earlier in the season, in Australia, during the very first races, he suffered a completely unexplained crash that he couldn't even explain in the immediate aftermath, not just in the first few minutes after the incident, but even days later when engineers reviewed all the telemetry and data. There was still no clear definitive answer for what actually went wrong or what caused him to lose control of the car. That crash cost him valuable championship points and crucial momentum right when the season was supposed to be building toward greatness. Then Monaco rolled around, historically one of Verstappen's absolute strongest events, where he's won multiple times and always seems to find perfection, and suddenly, boom, another power unit failure strikes while he was sitting comfortably in second position on the starting grid. That's not just disappointing in a normal sense, that's potentially championship deciding and season-altering levels of catastrophic bad luck that cost him a massive opportunity. But here's where the situation genuinely gets worse and more concerning. At Silverstone, during the qualifying session that determines the grid, another power unit issue appeared out of nowhere and absolutely destroyed his lap time and qualifying position. Now, if you want to try to rationalize it, you could chalk one mechanical failure up to coincidence. These things happen in racing sometimes. You could potentially brush off 2 failures and call it bad timing and unfortunate circumstances converging. But 3 power unit failures? 3 separate mechanical issues across 3 different races? That's not coincidence anymore. That becomes a pattern, and patterns indicate systemic problems deep within the power unit development or integration with the chassis.
Verstappen himself actually joked about this mounting frustration, saying something like, "Maybe I've hit a black cat," or that he felt cursed this year, which is a reference to superstition but also a way of expressing genuine confusion and frustration about why everything keeps breaking. But here's my honest take on the entire situation after analyzing all the details. It's definitely not supernatural or actually about hitting black cats or any superstitious nonsense. Instead, it's a combination of genuine engineering incompetence mixed with really terrible timing and decision-making under pressure. The Red Bull power unit is struggling in specific identifiable ways on specific types of circuits and in specific scenarios, and the team simply hasn't been able to diagnose what's causing these failures quickly enough or implement fixes fast enough before the next race weekend.
In Austria specifically, there was also a rear wing issue that directly contributed to his Q3 crash and qualifying failure that weekend. When you start listing all these individual problems out loud, one by one, the repeated power unit failures, the aerodynamic balance issues, the mysterious crashes that can't immediately be explained, the rear wing problems, the energy management struggles, you begin to see a clear picture of a team that's absolutely drowning in technical problems simultaneously. And that's before we even get to the real, fundamental issue that nobody in the team wants to openly admit, but Verstappen basically did anyway. He straight up admitted publicly in the paddock that Red Bull simply doesn't have the overall pace needed to compete at the front of the grid anymore. That's the nuclear honesty right there, and it's the kind of statement that changes everything. In his own direct words, he said that even if there had been no power unit issue in qualifying, if everything had gone perfectly mechanically, he still just didn't have the pace in the car to be fighting at the front with the fastest teams. 7th place was realistically the best he could have hoped for even in an absolute best-case scenario with zero mechanical problems. Do you actually understand how absolutely bad that sounds coming from the driver's mouth? Because at this stage of the season, that's not a power unit problem anymore, that's a fundamental car design problem. That's a wrong direction problem in development. That's a philosophical approach to the car that isn't working in 2026. And that's the kind of statement that tells you everything has catastrophically gone wrong at Red Bull. Now, let's have a deep conversation about what might be the most underrated and least understood crisis happening in Formula One right now, the energy management nightmare on high-speed, low-downforce circuits, specifically in 2026. This is actually the real key to understanding why Red Bull is struggling so catastrophically and why their situation is so difficult to recover from. In 2026, the entire Formula One regulations package changed fundamentally to include new energy recovery systems and advanced regeneration mechanics that completely shift how cars perform and behave on certain types of circuits. Silverstone is what engineers and teams classify as an energy-starved circuit, meaning fuel consumption is absolutely massive, energy regeneration opportunities are lower than on other tracks, and managing that impossible balance between speed and fuel consumption becomes literally the difference between winning and finishing down in the midfield. Red Bull's car and power unit setup is absolutely terrible at managing this energy-constraint scenario. According to what Verstappen said in detailed paddock interviews, Red Bull's car and power unit are simply not optimized for tracks where energy management is this critical to success. He even made specific predictions about future races using this same logic. He said Spa will basically be identical to Silverstone, and Monza as well will suffer from the same energy management problems. Those are three of the most technically challenging and high-speed circuits in all of Europe, and Red Bull knows with almost complete certainty that they're going to suffer and lose positions at all of them. That's not speculation or guessing, that's Verstappen essentially waving a white flag and saying, yeah, we're probably going to get absolutely destroyed at these places and there's nothing we can do about it. Here's what actually fascinates me the most about this whole situation, though. The return of yo-yo racing. That weird bouncing behavior at Silverstone this year is directly connected to this energy management problem and the broader regulations changes. That strange bouncing and porpoising you saw on the straights during practice and qualifying, that's cars struggling dramatically with downforce levels and fuel loads under extreme energy constraints that the 2026 regulations demand. It's the aerodynamic consequence of trying to manage energy recovery in a way that the current formula requires. It's physics pushing back against engineering. Verstappen isn't a complainer by nature. He's actually pretty accepting of challenges, but even he was incredibly clear and direct that this is just how Formula One is functioning right now, and there's not much anyone can do about it without completely redesigning their car. Except there actually is something you can do about it. You can design your car better for those specific energy management critical conditions. You can optimize your power unit specifically for that scenario and environment. You can develop aerodynamics that work better under energy constraints. But Red Bull either didn't do that at all or did it poorly and half-heartedly, and now they're paying an enormous price for that decision for an entire season. The energy management crisis isn't just a temporary problem that will resolve itself in a few races. It's a fundamental design choice and direction that's now haunting them for the entire 2026 championship season. And if you can't compete on high-speed circuits where energy management is king, you're looking at missing out on genuinely massive point opportunities. We're not talking about losing a couple of positions here or finishing a place or two lower. We're talking about potentially losing entire weekends' worth of valuable championship points at some of the most important races on the entire calendar. That's the difference between competing for a championship and fighting to stay in the top 10. Here's what really gets me about this entire situation, though, and this is where my personal analysis and opinion comes into play. The cost cap is actively preventing Red Bull from being able to recover and fix these problems in any meaningful way. Verstappen straight up said this directly, which is actually remarkable because drivers don't usually discuss cost caps in public. Because of cost cap restrictions that exist in modern Formula One, you simply cannot just throw massive amounts of money and unlimited resources at a problem and hope something sticks and works. That's the old strategy, the approach that
worked in previous years when budgets were virtually unlimited and teams could spend whatever they wanted. But now in the modern era, now you have to be incredibly strategic and thoughtful. You have to pick your upgrades with extreme care. You have to evaluate things race by race and make calculated betting decisions about where to spend your limited development resources and budget. Red Bull simply doesn't have the margin for error that they used to enjoy when they dominated for multiple years. They can't just build 3 different front-wing concepts and test them all in parallel to see which works best. They can't have a massive factory operation running multiple parallel development programs simultaneously. They're limited by the exact same financial budget as every other team on the grid. And unlike some teams that are clearly operating more efficiently and getting more performance per dollar spent, Red Bull seems to be bleeding resources and budget, trying to figure out what's fundamentally wrong with their car and how to fix it. Last year, according to what Verstappen explained, Red Bull somehow managed to mount an incredible and remarkable comeback after the summer break. They brought upgrades that made a genuine and measurable difference in car performance. They restructured things strategically and tactically. They made the right development calls. And that success was almost enough to win Verstappen his 5th World Championship. That incredible recovery and comeback was possible because they had the financial flexibility and resources to do it. This year, Verstappen doesn't believe that's possible anymore, and he said it directly and clearly. He said that the cost cap means you simply can't keep bringing a lot of upgrades to the car week after week, so you're essentially stuck with what you've got as a base setup, evaluating things race by race, trying to make small incremental improvements, but understanding that on tracks where your energy management limited and struggling, you're basically just accepting that you're going to struggle and finish lower than you should. That's the kind of statement that perfectly shows how trapped and limited Red Bull has become. It's not just that they need more upgrades, it's that they fundamentally can't afford the kind of massive, expensive development push and resources that would actually be necessary to recover from this situation. The cost cap has turned this from a pure performance and engineering problem into a resource allocation problem, and that's way harder to solve because there's literally nothing you can do about it when you've already spent your budget. Here's the part that actually blew me away when I was analyzing everything. Verstappen even mentioned that he had mechanical trouble and issues while leading at the Nürburgring 24 hours endurance race. His car experienced mechanical failures in the closing stages while he was actually in first place and winning. Think about that situation for a genuine second. It's not just Formula One where these problems are happening. It's bleeding into his other racing ventures and competitions. There's clearly something about Verstappen's luck this year that's almost comedic in how universally and consistently bad it is across everything he does.
But here's my take, and I want to be completely clear about this. I don't actually think it's luck in the supernatural sense. I think it's a team that's under enormous pressure, desperately trying to solve way too many technical problems simultaneously, and making genuine mistakes because they're stretched too thin and their resources are too limited. When you're desperate and under pressure to fix power unit issues, aerodynamic balance problems, energy management strategies, circuit-specific performance issues, and you're doing all of that while operating under a cost cap that absolutely won't let you throw unlimited resources and budget at the problems to brute force a solution, mistakes happen. Quality control issues emerge, mechanical failures start occurring, corners get cut that shouldn't be cut, and suddenly you're the guy who hit a black cat, when really what happened is your entire team is just completely overwhelmed by the scope of problems they're facing. That's actually worse than bad luck, because bad luck is random and unpredictable, but being overwhelmed and stretched too thin is a systematic failure of organization and management. It means the foundation of the team is cracking and developing fractures. It means the organization needs to fundamentally regroup and restructure, not just sit around hoping their luck gets better and the failures stop happening on their own. Verstappen's comment about not being superstitious and believing things will eventually get better is optimistic on the surface, but I genuinely don't think he actually believes it deep down, not really, because if he truly believed that things would recover naturally, he wouldn't have made that cold statement about the media not asking him about title fights anymore. That's the comment and statement of someone who's done the actual math, analyzed the realistic scenarios, and accepted that this entire season is essentially a wash and a loss. And here's what I genuinely think matters most about this entire situation as we look forward, because we're now in mid-season and the actual picture of what's happening is becoming crystal clear. Red Bull has fundamentally gone from being championship contenders and genuine title fighters to a team that's struggling to even compete at the front, and there's simply no realistic path to recovery with all the constraints they're currently facing. The power unit issues that keep occurring, the energy management problems on specific and important circuits, the aerodynamic balance struggles that make the car difficult to drive, the mechanical failures that seem random but indicate deeper problems, the cost cap limitations that prevent meaningful development, none of these are quick fixes that can be solved in a few weeks. None of these are problems that will resolve themselves as the season progresses. Verstappen is looking forward to and hoping for the summer break because he's genuinely emotionally exhausted and worn down, not because he thinks a few weeks is going to magically solve all of their core problems. The arrogance and self-assurance that Red Bull demonstrated for so many years is finally horrifically crashing down upon them, and the irony is that it couldn't have happened at a worse time, because now, unlike in previous years, they actually don't have the unlimited financial resources to get themselves out of this deep hole. The cost cap has turned Red Bull from the dominant force in Formula One into a team that's fundamentally targeting the summer break as a sort of relief and not a period to regroup and launch a comeback. That tells you everything you need to know about how serious the problems are and the impact that they're having on Verstappen.
Week off will magically solve anything or reset the situation. He joked that the summer break isn't even long enough, which is code for I need way more than a week to process and deal with how badly this has gone and how fundamentally broken things are right now. The actual reality and facts are that Red Bull peaked earlier in the season with their solid performance in Austria, and they're now in a clear downward trajectory with absolutely no realistic break on that decline. The remaining races at Silverstone, Spa, and Monza will be difficult and disappointing based on everything we know. The rest of the season will be about salvaging and preserving whatever points you can collect, while simultaneously understanding and accepting that championship dreams are completely dead and not coming back. That's the genuine Red Bull reality in 2026, and it's not a pleasant situation to be in. Now, is it theoretically possible that something unexpected changes? Sure, stranger things have happened in Formula One history, and miracles do occasionally occur. But based on Verstappen's own direct analysis of the situation, based on the actual fundamental limitations of the cost cap, based on the systemic nature of the problems they're facing, and based on how deep these issues go, I genuinely and honestly believe this is Red Bull's lowest point in many years, and the road back to competitiveness is going to be considerably longer than anyone wants to admit out loud. So what's next? The million-dollar question that nobody in the paddock can answer right now is whether Red Bull has any hidden development tokens or engineering loopholes left to exploit before the cost cap strangles them completely. According to sources close to the team, a major power unit software update is being tested back at the factory that could unlock a more aggressive energy deployment strategy without breaching reliability limits. But that update has to go through a rigorous sign-off process that might not be completed until after the summer break, and by then, the championship picture could be very different. There's also speculation, not officially confirmed, that the team might sacrifice some race results at less energy-sensitive circuits to conserve budget for a Spa-specific aerodynamic package, a bold gamble that would essentially write off certain weekends to focus on minimizing the damage at Verstappen's favorite tracks. That would be a remarkably pragmatic approach from an organization that has historically chased victory everywhere, and it would signal a genuine shift in philosophy born from the harsh realities of the 2026 formula. I find that strategic uncertainty fascinating because it transforms the season into a chess match where Red Bull isn't playing for the championship crown right now, but rather for damage limitation and learning, which is something fans of the team have never experienced in the Verstappen era. The story has shifted from will they dominate to can they survive with dignity, and that emotional pivot is incredibly compelling if you let yourself engage with it on its own terms. Let me circle back to that black cat line because it's destined to become one of those iconic Verstappen quotes that gets referenced for years, and yet it also highlights something about his personality that I really enjoy, the ability to deploy humor as a defense mechanism without undermining the seriousness of the situation. He said he's not very superstitious, which immediately makes me suspect he is at least a little bit superstitious because people who genuinely aren't never feel the need to clarify. But the deeper layer is that he's basically telling the world that this much misfortune simply cannot continue indefinitely, that probability will eventually swing back in his favor. And he might well be right. The law of averages suggests that a season's worth of sensor failures, rear wing gremlins, and power unit hiccups has to balance out eventually, assuming the underlying engineering isn't fundamentally flawed. However, the wild card is whether the energy management weakness counts as bad luck or bad design, because those are two very different categories, and only one of them gets fixed by time and statistical reversion. If the RB22's hybrid system is inherently inefficient on long straight circuits, no amount of positive thinking will make it go faster. It will require a technical solution that might be months away. Verstappen's comment, then, is both a piece of psychological self-care and a quiet dare to the engineering department. Prove me wrong, find the performance, and turn this black cat into a lucky charm. I think it's appropriate at this stage to step back and appreciate the sheer weirdness of the 2026 season as a whole, because it's not just Red Bull suffering from yo-yo racing and strange technical failures. The entire grid has been scrambling to adapt to a formula that feels half-baked, with drivers from multiple teams privately expressing frustration about the racing spectacle. According to reports from the drivers' briefings, there have been heated discussions about tweaking the energy deployment regulations to reduce the extreme speed differentials, but getting unanimous agreement on changes mid-season is like herding very expensive, very fast cats. This broader context matters because it frames Verstappen's struggles not as a solitary Red Bull problem, but as a symptom of a sport in the middle of an identity crisis, trying to balance sustainability with entertainment and occasionally failing at both. The public statements from the FIA suggest they are monitoring the situation, but any regulatory adjustment would likely come too late to impact the current championship fight, which leaves teams like Red Bull trapped in the limbo of having to solve problems they didn't fully create. I sometimes wonder if we'll look back at 2026 as the season that taught Formula One some hard lessons about not over-engineering the rulebook, and Verstappen's candid interviews will be cited as the early warning signal that everyone should have taken more seriously. History has a funny way of vindicating blunt honesty, and if a few technical directives get rewritten next year because of what's happening right now, then this painful period might actually serve a greater purpose. And now I want to leave you with something to ponder as we head toward the summer shutdown. What would a victory at Spa actually mean for Verstappen at this point? Not in terms of points, but in terms of narrative. Even if the Red Bull is hopelessly outmatched on paper, the Ardennes weather has a habit of shredding expectations, throwing rain showers and safety cars into the mix. And we've seen Verstappen pull off miracles in mixed conditions before. If he somehow drags that struggling RB22 onto the top step through sheer force of will, would that be the most impressive drive of his career, surpassing even his wet weather masterpieces? I lean towards yes, because it would be a triumph of talent over machinery in a way that feels almost mythic, a modern fairy tale where the driver becomes greater than the car. Conversely, if the race unfolds as the data predicts and he finishes somewhere in the lower half of the top 10, the narrative will shift from can they catch up to what can they learn for 2027, which is a completely different type of story, but no less fascinating for those who enjoy the long game. In my opinion, that's the beauty of this situation. Whatever happens, we're witnessing a chapter of Formula One history that will be dissected for years, and having a front-row seat to a champion's toughest challenge is a privilege, even if it's painful to watch. So keep your eyes on the timing screens, and maybe, just maybe, keep a little black cat figurine on your desk for good luck. It can't hurt.